This is the Breakaway Podcast, presented by the National Bird Hunters Association. The NBHA's The Breakaway Podcast is brought to you by Purina Pro Plan. Fine-tuned nutrition to promote strength and stamina in the canine athlete and longest-standing supporter of the sport of field trialing nationwide. You can fuel your champion with Purina Pro Plan using various physical and online retailers wherever pet food is sold. Purina Pro Plan. Fuel the champion within. Garmin. Delivering innovative GPS-enabled technology across diverse markets including sports and fitness, outdoor recreation, marine, automotive, and aviation. Garmin. Engineered on the inside for life on the outside. Gun Dog Supply. The leader in training collars, tracking collars, and so much more. Fast, friendly service, great customer support, and the newest gun dog products on the market. Gun Dog Supply. We train our dogs with the products we sell. Mule brand clothing and apparel. Outdoor clothing for all sorts of environments and conditions. From hunters in briars and wading creeks to forestry personnel, farmers, motorcycle riders, and utility workers, Mule is clothing for hunters made by hunters for over 38 years. Find your Mule brand gear at www.okiedogssupply.com. Gun Dog Central. Gun Dog Central is a centralized location for finding your next dog, whether it be a pointing dog, retriever, flusher, versatile breed, hound, terrier, you name it. Gun Dog Central is the place to find your next canine athlete. To find your next champion, visit them at www.gundogcentral.com. OnX Hunt, the #1 hunting GPS app. Join the millions of hunters who trust OnX Hunt to find more game, discover new access, and hunt smarter. OnX Hunt. Know where you stand. And Park Cities Quail Coalition. Park Cities Quail Coalition is a nonprofit organization run 100% by volunteers who are passionate about sporting traditions and determined to make it available to future generations by working to sustain and restore huntable wild quail populations, to encourage and educate interested youth, and to celebrate the quail hunting heritage. Happy New Year and welcome back to the 9th episode of the Breakaway Podcast. I am once again your host, Joe Hopkins. So glad that you've tuned in. And if you enjoy this podcast, or even if you're listening for the first time, please take the time to tell a friend, like, subscribe, and review the channel to help grow and promote the podcast and support the sport of field trialing that we all love. Our guest this episode is Amateur Field Trial Clubs of America President Mr. Tony King of Centralia, Missouri. Tony is the newly elected AFTCA president, but has also served in other executive positions within the organization and is also a discerning amateur field trial competitor as well. Tony is an outdoorsman, has roots in the NBHA, and presently competes throughout the country, reports trials, and is a highly sought-after judge as well. But before we get to Tony, I wanted to make everyone aware of a potential new and exciting venture. The Breakaway Podcast is in the early infantile stages of structuring and crowdsourcing interested parties for a one-of-a-kind opportunity to own a high-caliber field trial dog on the National Bird Hunters Association National Circuit. How, you ask? The answer is syndication. Other sports, such as horse racing, have long benefited from the syndication of ownership to offer an easy pathway into the game and provide individuals with the ownership experience at a fraction of the cost. And let's face it, not everyone can afford or has the time or has the means to source a high-quality field trial prospect, much more financially carrying the burden of putting a dog on a competitive circuit. This new venture, if kick-started, will provide new trialers, old trialers, or anyone looking for a streamlined and simple approach into ownership on a national level. Syndications or partnerships are such a good option if you want to dip your toe in the water before committing significant resources to build your own kennel and start owning your own stock, and you can participate and learn about the game from the ground up before venturing out on your own. Utilizing our platform, our ever-growing connections, and experience in syndication, this new venture will source high-quality stock and place that individual or individuals in the capable hands of professional handlers for development and competition on the national NBHA circuit. So if you're interested in taking the next step in ownership, looking to get your feet wet into field trials, expanding your existing competitive portfolio without breaking the bank, or just looking for affordable fun and action in the field trial game, get in touch with me at joehopkins7@gmail.com. That's JOEHOP KINS7@gmail.com. And let me know if you'd like to be a part of a venture such as this, or if something like this interests you. Once again, if you'd like to try your hand at field trial dog ownership at the national level at a fraction of the cost, email me at joehopkins7@gmail.com for more details. But before we get to Tony, let's go around the field trial world. In the National Bird Hunters Association, the Kentucky State Classic took place at the Miller Welch Central Kentucky Wildlife Management Area in Berea, where two-seamer, a pointer male owned by Colby Tackett, handled by Justin Crook, took the Classic, followed by Tennessee Cooper, another pointer male owned and handled by Greg Eisenberg, taking runner-up. The following Derby Classic saw Boatwright's Iron Eagle, a setter male owned by Terry Boatwright and handled by James Cleve, taking first place, and another setter for Mr. James Cleve, Outcast Siren Song, owned by John Clough, taking second place, and it was PB Texas Tornado, owned by Brian Stockerman and handled by Justin Crook, rounding out the placement. On to horseback action across the country. The National Amateur Shooting Dog Invitational Championship saw a Miller double at the Round Pond Plantation in Leslie, Georgia on December 17th, with Miller's Heat Wave and Miller's upgraded version taking both the championship and runner-up laurels for owner handlers Fran and Jack Miller. Staying in Georgia, the Region 16 Amateur All-Age Championship at the Chickasaw Plantation saw Touch's Lone Dominator taking it all for Mr. Ken Cantrell, with Chris Cagle's Haney Stormwarn catching the runner-up champion slot. Over to Hoffman, North Carolina, it's Megan Henry's pointer female Storms In, handled by fiance Matt Pendergast, running away with the 2023-2024 Region 3 Amateur All-Age Championship, and pointer male Cape Hickory Bucky for owner handler Paul Gadd taking runner-up. Still at Hoffman, it was Dr. Bob Canada's pointer male Hard Truth winning North Carolina Open Shooting Dog Championship for handler Doug Ray, and the runner-up slot was taken by Chelsea's Mae West, a pointer female handled by Sean Kinkler and owned by Brian Sadler. The Region 6 Amateur All-Age Championship relocated to the Huntington Field Trial Grounds of Mr. David Williams on December 10th celebrated this rendition's champion in the form of the pointer male Como Thunder, owned and handled by David Russell, followed by Jim Pendergast's pointer female Dialed In taking the silver medal. The Georgia Field Trial Association welcomed entrance to Waynesboro, Georgia, where it was Judd Carlton handling this year's Georgia Derby Championship winner in Aaron's Happy Hour, a pointer male owned by Mike Sweet, and Dr. Fred Quarter's pointer female Game Star from the Derby string of Ike Todd winning runner-up. Following the Derby Championship, it was the Georgia Quail Championship with Touch's Malcolm Story winning it all for handler Mark McLean and owner Alex Rickert, followed by runner-up champion Haney's All In, also handled by Mark McLean, this time owned by Steve and Stacy Croy. And rounding out the marathon trials there in Waynesboro, the Georgia Open Shooting Dog Championship was taken by Silver W. Jill Z, handled by Sean Kinkler and owned by Dr. Debbie Osner, with Triple Wickle Carbon Copy, a pointer male handled by Mike Tracy, owned by Bob Bergman, taking second. Pointer female in last year's Missouri Shooting Dog Championship runner-up Hales High Flyer wins the 23-24 Oklahoma Shooting Dog Championship at the McFarland Ingersoll Ranch for owner Dr. Jeffrey Hale under the whistle of Eddie Taylor, with pointer male Touches Steely Dan, handled by Virgil Moore and owned by John Van Horn, taking runner-up champion. One of the top amateur shooting dogs continues a hot roll. Nemaha's Tapwater takes the Region 7 Amateur Shooting Dog Championship for owner and handler Dr. Pat McIntyre out at the Lake Murray Field Trial Grounds in Ardmore, Oklahoma, and runner-up champion being named Texas Cool, owned and handled by Buck Neal. It was a Contanzerite meteorite at the AFTCA Region Amateur Shooting Dog Championship at the Conecuh Station Field Trial Grounds in Union Springs, Alabama, with champion Backcountry Bruiser taking the championship, and runner-up also owned and handled by Chris Contanzerite in the form of Backcountry Pure Gold. Congratulations, Chris. Pointer male Rampage wins the Continental Open Derby Championship at the 129th Continental Trials in Greenville, Florida. Rampage is owned by Tucker Johnson, handled by Luke Eisenhart, and runner-up champion was Coltrane, owned by Dr. Ron Deal and handled by Lee Phillips. In the world of German Shorthairs, BMB's Free Ride is now a two-time Invitational champion, winning the Open All-Age Invitational for 2024 in the NGSPA circuit at the Hell Creek Wildlife Management Area, handled by Brandon Blum and owned by Brandon and Jennifer Blum. Another walking field trial results, owner Fred Rose's Smoker Eyes Buck took the 2023-2024 U.S. Complete Open Invitational Championship in Pamplico, South Carolina, with Tony Bingham at the helm of the pointer male, followed by runner-up champion Sumac Sachet, a pointer female owned by the McPhersons and handled by Mark Hughes. NBHA dates on the calendar upcoming. The NBHA Southern Regional Championship is back at the Gunby family's AG Preserve in Glenwood, Georgia on January 26th with a drawing date of January 22nd, starting off the season's regional championship circuit. This year's rendition will also offer open walking derby and puppy stakes, in addition to a free, yes I said free, 15-minute youth walking stake as well. Be sure to bring the kids. Then on January 27th at the White Oak Ranch in Edina, Missouri, the North Missouri Field Trial Association will be drawing on January 23rd for a full suite of open and amateur walking stakes, including an amateur judgment ceases at flush or gun dog stake. Another big ticket item on February 9th is the NBHA National Invitational Breeders' Championship at Grovesprings, Missouri, followed by the 36th Annual NBHA Futurity and Jerry Kilgore Puppy Classic. Then it's out west to Dexter, Kansas, where Jason Patty and the South Central Kansas Bird Dog Club is going to host the NBHA Western Regional Championship February 18th to the 20th at the Radcliffe Ranch in Dexter, Kansas. For more information or a schedule of all upcoming field trial events, please visit www.nbhadog.org or www.americanfield.com, or follow us on Facebook and Instagram for all your latest field trial news. Before we get to Mr. Tony King, though, let's check in with the NBHA Futurity Director, Mr. Jim Ogle, and talk about the upcoming NBHA Futurity in February. Joining me now is NBHA Futurity Director Mr. Jim Ogle. Jim, thanks for joining me on short notice to talk about the Futurity. How's it going?
Pretty good.
Jim, we've got a trial coming up on the schedule that's a pretty important date on our calendar, and that is the upcoming NBHA Futurity, Jerry Kilgore Puppy Classic, and the National Invitational Breeders' Championship. But first and foremost, Jim, what in the heck is a Futurity?
Futurity, with regards to field trials, is a field trial or championship field trial with nomination and or qualification requirements. Some of our qualifications, you must be a Futurity nominated upon litter within 6 months of your whelp date. The nomination fee is $35. If you wait past the 6 month, that is a $70. It's like a penalty, but that goes up to $70. Your sire and dam and puppy must all be registered with the Field Dog Stud Book, which is now the UKC.
Right.
Once you're Futurity registered, you are registered for life.
So, Jim, I'm going to breed a litter, and I've heard scuttle about this Futurity on offer for dogs as they get older and as they advance and stuff, and I would like the progeny of this litter for the chance to run in this Futurity, whether I own these dogs or they have different owners down the road. So I go on to the NBHA website. I'm sure there's a form that I have to get and fill out. And from what I'm hearing, I nominate this litter, and it has to be done within 6 months of this litter being born. And if not, the fee increases to register this litter. And they have to be registered within the Field Dog Stud Book owned by the UKC now. And if that happens, these dogs are good to go for life.
Yes.
And this is a pretty big competition, because a lot of our pros and a lot of our astute amateurs really hone in on this date and really kind of jockey their calendars around to make this date, because there's so much on offer here. We have the Breeders' Championship for broke dogs, for our shooting dogs, a 1 hour championship stake. You can bring those Futurity dogs. And then on top of that, one of the biggest puppy competitions on the field trial calendar, period, the Jerry Kilgore Puppy Classic on this. So this is a big date. There's a lot of work that goes into putting on these trials, isn't there?
Absolutely. If you've ever done just a weekend trial, you could probably multiply that by 10.
I tell everybody that I think of all of us with jobs with the NBHA, Jim Ogle has one of the toughest ones, because this is one of the biggest trials that we have all year long on our calendar, and it's a lot of work. But Jim, let's take this really quickly, incrementally, trial by trial here. So the first one, starting on February 14th, barring how many entries they have, is the NBHA National Invitational Breeders' Championship. Now, that's a mouthful, but tell me a little bit about what this trial is.
The Breeders' Championship is exactly that. We're trying to promote our NBHA dogs. So after you have nominated your litter, like we talked about a while ago, you are good for life, but there's other qualifications. And to enter this trial, you have to start with, in our rule book, you can go to our website and check all this stuff out, but it has to start with Section 5, entry eligibility. And this is dogs to be eligible for an open championship stake shall have a winner's certificate recognized by the American Field from a placement in a Derby or Shooting Dog's open stake. That is specific. It says Derby or Shooting Dog open stake.
Gotcha.
Now you have to go down to D. For the Open Invitational Breeders' Championship, eligible dogs, the first requirement is A. So you have to have A.
Gotcha.
So your placement in an open or amateur, shooting dog, or Derby stake, that's your number one. And then you go to number two, it says any dog that is from an NBHA Futurity nominated litter that has a qualifying open placement recognized by the American Field from a Derby or Shooting Dog stake. Now, if you have this, you are good for life.
Okay.
Once you're nominated and you have that open placement, you are good for life.
I can come back year on year.
Absolutely.
Okay.
If you don't have that, you have to have placed in an NBHA trial the previous year.
Okay.
Or season, however you want to say that.
Correct me if I'm wrong. Let's condense this down. Any dog with NBHA Open Shooting Dog or Derby placement from the previous season can qualify to run in this trial.
Yes.
Or any shooting dog or Derby from a Futurity nominated litter and that dog from that litter has to have an American Field open placement of some sort, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Absolutely. There you go.
Now, there's a little cherry on top of this cake here, Jim, in this trial. There's a bonus here. What's this bonus?
This bonus is if you put your dog in the Futurity and you run, that is feet on the ground running, you are eligible for a $2,000 bonus in the Breeders' Championship.
Wow, big bucks, big time. Lots of incentives. That $35, that nomination fee for that litter can really pay itself back if you show up at the Breeders' Championship and you happen to get a piece of that. That can really pay off dividends. That's a good investment. We're going to sell it as an investment anyways. Nothing in the bird dog world is investment. That's my disclaimer. Wednesday, February 14th, everything draws for this trial on February 6th. That's including the Futurity, the Puppy Classic. Everything draws February 6th. Grovesprings, Missouri, Jim, that's kind of your home base, your home grounds. That's where all this is happening, right?
Absolutely. These grounds it's the Sportsman's Association grounds. We have camper hookups for $10 a day, dog kennels, horse stalls, the clubhouse with limited bunks. These grounds will show a dog that loves to run an edge.
Cool.
There's liberated birds already there. We will add to it, of course, but first come, first serve.
In other words, beautiful grounds, lots of birds, great facilities. Bring yourself, bring your dogs, bring your horses, bring your kids, bring your wife, bring your granny. Everybody will have a place at the trial. That's awesome. Now let's jump down to the Futurity. Now this is a shooting dog or a broke dog stake, right, Jim?
Correct. We have a shooting dog or a broke dog stake. Now that's just the standards that we use. Can't say everybody's going to be broke.
Right.
It's just part of it. The Futurity nominated for registered dogs. It's a 30-minute qualifier with a 1-hour callback. And we're going to start the 16th.
Okay, and that's for That's for those dogs that have been in that Futurity nominated litter and registered dogs with those open requirements, those open placement requirements that we talked about earlier. Like we said, if any of this sounds confusing or is as clear as mud, go to the NBHA website. We have documentation that spells all that out, or you can get a hold of Jim, find his contact details. He'll be glad to answer any questions, or I will too. You can call, email anytime. Now, the Jerry Kilgore Puppy Classic, Jim. This is a big one. Now, I don't really get excited over puppy stakes for me personally, but if the puppy world has a big dance, this is it. The Jerry Kilgore Puppy Classic. A lot of people like this, and they really shoot for this for those high-end precocious puppies. 30-minute puppy stake. What's on the line, and what do you have to be?
You need to be ready for your derby stage. In everything we're looking for, we are looking for a dog to go to the next level.
Right.
Now, we don't liberate any birds. That is in our rules, so we just don't put any birds out. But these judges are still looking for all the same stuff.
Yeah.
You still have to be Futurity nominated, and this will start as soon as we get done with the Futurity, the 30-minute course. You have to run 30 minutes in this. This is not our regular 20-minute puppy stake.
Gotcha. So these are really precocious puppies. They're the best of the best. They're ready to go on to that derby stage from what I'm hearing. Those top high caliber puppies. Once again, these are for Futurity nominated and registered dogs out of those litters. This starts, I think, at the conclusion of the Futurity after the qualifying series of the Futurity. Yeah. And it's important to note these puppies are judged on pure potential on the ground application. Are they looking for birds? Are they just running the country? Are they look like they're going to be a good derby with prospect? Do they look like they're going to be maybe have that caliber acumen to be a shooting dog? That's exactly what our judges are looking for. We've talked a lot about the judges, Jim. Who are the judges?
Our judges for the Futurity and the Puppy Classic are Bob Burchett and Mike Fuller.
Okay.
One thing on this, there will be birds on the course. All these liberated birds are there.
Oh, okay.
We can't get them out of there.
Gotcha.
And all the birds that we had put out for the derbies and the championship, there will be birds on the course.
But it doesn't matter. Those puppies, they're not judged on any bird work or anything like that. And hey, if your puppy comes across a bird, just count it as a freebie. You don't have to pay for that.
Absolutely.
Your puppy's gonna get charged up from that, and it might help your case. But that's kind of the 30,000-foot view of the NBHA National Invitational Breeders Championship, the 38th annual NBHA Futurity, which is a long-standing trial of ours in the Jerry Kilgore Puppy Classic. Jim, you got a lot of work on your hands. I hope you have a lot of people to help you. Tell people how to get a hold of you, or what they can do to give you entries or to find out more, or if they want to come and just watch or maybe even help you.
Yeah, absolutely. You can always call me. My phone number is 417-388-0734. You can find it on the bottom of the Futurity or the puppy nomination papers. My email is also on there. The Missouri Bird Hunters will also be helping with this trial. These guys from Missouri are awesome helpers.
Yeah, it's another one of those futurities of people, man, that they're just solid people, and they band together and they put together. If there's an event with a Missouri Bird Hunters name on it, I can promise you it's going to be a trial to remember and a good quality trial. You can go to our website, nbhadog.org. Facebook page, the American Field Interactive Calendar. There's a lot of places to find out about the dates, requirements, lodging, location, judges, and how to get a hold of Jim and give your entries.
Can we throw in just a quickie on the championship? I have 2 judges from Kansas. It is Greg Gibson and Frank Schoenborn, and those guys are awesome judges also. They work a lot together, and my other judges work a lot together, so they're on the same page.
Can't forget the judges of the championship. That wouldn't be appropriate. We want to take care of those guys, don't we?
Absolutely.
Awesome, Jim. Thank you so much for coming on and explaining the Futurity. Now on to our guest for this episode of the Breakaway Podcast, Mr. Tony King. Joining us now on the Breakaway Podcast, Mr. Tony King, AFTCA president and amateur field trial competitor. Tony, I know you've been on the road. It's been kind of hard to put this together because I've been moving this way. You've been zagging that way. We finally can make it happen, and I'm not going to put too much pressure on you, but I've had a lot of people texting me and messaging me, when's the next episode coming out? I'm snowed in. I've got nothing to do. I need something to listen to. Give me something good. Tony King's up to bat. Don't strike out here. We got to have a good one for these people.
Well, I'll do my best, Joe. You know, I'm probably, I was never known as a home run hitter. I'm more of kind of a singles and line drive type guy. So
I was a utility player myself.
We'll do the best we can here.
There we go. No problem. Well, Tony, you've been on the road and you've gotten back home and gotten back in the swing of things with wintertime, all that it's had thrown at you with your job. And I know you've been a busy man, but you just got back from West Tennessee on a little foray into some competition there. What were you up to and what did you get into?
Well, you know, for many years, I believe it was years ago when I judged the NBHA National Championship at Ames Plantation. I was judging with Quentin Wiseman. And I told Quentin at that time, I said, you know, whenever my schedule allows it, and whenever I get a break from ball games or the opportunity to do this, I'm coming back here to run dogs at Ames, West Tennessee area, this mecca of field trialing, amateur field trialing in the country. And it just so happened that this year's schedule, work schedule, ball game schedule, that sort of thing allowed me the opportunity to get down there and run with those guys. You know, cool. I finally got back to a point in my field trial career with a couple of dogs. You know, we always go through those times to where we may hit a good lick with a string of dogs, but there are years to where you're trying to develop and get back to that point with dogs you feel can be competitive. And I'm finally getting back to that point, and I felt like it was a great time and had the opportunity to get back down or to get to that area for the first time and experience what those guys have down there. And to me, it was something special. It was really, really enjoyable.
That's awesome. You got to run in the Ames Amateur Joe G. Walker Memorial All-Age, and then you ran the West Tennessee Amateur All-Age, so you really got the full flavor and effect that whole part of the country offers. And like you said, it is a mecca, you know, for the grounds and the people that are there, and it's just a good place to go, you know, and all. Is it as cool as it sounds to get to run at the Ames Plantation?
It is. And you know, you have to put it into perspective. And while I was down there, you know, I was by myself, staying in a motel by myself. And when I'd go back to the motel, I would think about the dogs that I watched, took a little time to reflect on the dogs that I ran. And, you know, and I got to thinking, well, think about all of the great dogs down in that part of the country that competed at West Tennessee, that, you know, the tradition that the Curry family has carried on down there and competed at Ames and the national championship and the AFTCA invitationals. And it was really a cool experience.
That's awesome. One experience I'd hope to have one day myself. But you went down there and competed, and I've just kind of kept my eyes on the results down there. And I know Haney Silver Dollar won the Joe G. Walker, and Hurricane Seeker, Davy's dog, got second, and that Misty Morning Masked Man got third. And then the West Tennessee Amateur, Davy looks like got first and third with Como Thunder, and then Haney's Hurricane Seeker. So he was another out-of-towner that kind of made the trip up there too, and looks like he had a good showing there. But I'm glad you shared that with you. It's one of the bucket list things I want to do. I want to go up there and watch the National, and then also maybe hopefully run there one day myself. But that's the now, Tony. Let's talk about way back when Tony King first got started. How did Tony King find himself into this bird dog world, immersed now that's almost into what you could call a career with administrative roles in the AFTCA and running dogs all over the country? How did you get started from the ground up?
My story's probably not much different than a lot of guys. I grew up in West Central Illinois in farm country, kind of where Missouri, Iowa, and Illinois all meet on the Illinois side of the Mississippi River. And I grew up, following in the footsteps of my father quail hunting. I remember carrying my first Revelation pump 20 gauge behind a short hair, growing up in junior high and high school. And, that transition, birding was ingrained in my early childhood development and the sport of it. And it just carried through as I became an adult. I started out like many others. I believe my first field trials I competed in were shoot to retrieve. I started taking the American field at that time. When I graduated college, I got a degree at Missouri in fisheries and wildlife biology. When we moved back to Illinois, managed an Orvis Indoor Swing Shooting Lodge and whitetail deer hunting operation. And at that time,
awesome, we
had a need for guide dogs. So I put a string of pointers together. My wife bought me my first pointer, which she probably regrets dearly to this day as a birthday present. So, that transitioned into more shoot to retrieve trials. And when we moved back to Missouri, I started, by taking the American field, I was enthralled by the articles about the dogs and the people and the competitive nature of field trialing and what was involved. And I got into the NBHA and from there went from the NBHA to horseback shooting dog and now competing in amateur all age competition.
That's awesome. And that's the progression that can happen once you stick your toe in somewhere and find out that you actually do love it. And like I say, not everybody loves this game and not everybody can find themselves to keep going on to different things or new things, but there's a lot of people like you, Tony, that have that same kind of trajectory there. They started here, but they ended up there, and you don't know until you get started somewhere. Can you remember who or how you got started in field trials? Did you make that jump by yourself? Did somebody take you or encourage you? How'd that happen?
There was a gentleman in Monette, Missouri by the name of Ray Eubanks, and he had a very competitive dog in NBHA, and I meant to look that up, the name of that dog today. The name of that dog kind of slips me, but it was a champion and very competitive, and I had bought a female puppy from Ray Eubanks, and Ray says, "Hey, why don't you come down here to Grovesprings and run?" And I had another puppy at that time out of, it was a double rebel jackbred puppy from Texas, and run your puppies and see what you think. And ended up running, I believe it was a NBHA Classic that Gerald Eulis put on, and ran that puppy, placed in the field placed in that Classic, and it just snowballed from there.
That's awesome. That's awesome. And you're a full-fledged competitor now. I mean, you're obviously on the road competing, and you're entrenched out there in Missouri, and you make forays out there west in the Midwest, competing a lot. But if people keep track and look in the field, they're going to see a lot of your riding too. You are a consummate reporter of field trials, and in particularly the Missouri Open Shooting Dog Championship, right? You've consistently reported that trial and many others.
When you're a field trial club member, and as you progress and get actively involved with a field trial club, your roles change, and you become club secretary, club reporter, club president, club do it all.
Yeah.
And so, that I got involved in the Missouri Open Shooting Dog Championship and Midwestern State Shooting Dog Futurity. It was before it was the Futurity. It was just a Derby stake back, I think, 2012, 2013. And before that, I was asked to report the shoot Shooting Dog Invitational at Grovesprings. And I've always kind of had a knack for writing. And I love to read the old articles and the
Same.
old reports, the American Field. And I took some of what, some of the past and tried to, link it to the future.
Sure.
And reporting a field trial it's one of those things that it's a labor of love.
Sure.
It really is, because it is part of field trialing that a lot of guys do not enjoy.
Yeah.
I actually enjoy it when I have the time to do it.
Well, and two, I tell people this all the time. It's one of the most unsung jobs at a trial because, the day of or during the running, it's not the most fashionable thing. And like you said, it's probably more work than love, and probably more labor than love, I should say. But when you go and you sit down in your recliner and you sit back and you pop open the field there to read those accounts and you read a really good report, nothing gives you more gratification and more satisfaction than to read someone that has watched those braces, seen those handlers, and watched that action unfold, and then put pen to paper to report it in such a way that you have a good grasp at what that trial did and what it looked like, and the sounds and the scenes and the people. And when I went back, I picked a few of those out. You definitely encapsulate all that, and I really respect that, and I encourage people, just like what you do, you're in all facets of your club and you report, but judging is also another thing. You had this discussion. We have a lot of people that like to show up and run at trials, but we're kind of in need of a lot of those same people to do other jobs as well. Run the dog wagon, report the trials, judge the trials every now and then. And, maybe it's just so much as to have snacks out on the tailgate or back at the clubhouse at lunchtime. We need more people to pitch in and do those type things, don't we?
We definitely do. I think if every amateur or open competitor would take a weekend off and contribute to a field trial club in some shape, manner, fashion, it would improve the sport.
Sure.
There are so many great club members. There's so many great worker bees in our sport. But as the sport evolves and as it progresses, it seems like we have less and less field trial club members, and the ratio of competitors versus club members is getting a little bit out of balance.
Yeah.
And for our sport to survive, we really need, for those competitors, the guys that you see run every weekend or every other weekend, if they would take a step back a little bit and say, hey, for this sport to continue on and something my children want to be part of, I really need to be a worker bee a couple, 3 weekends a year.
Yeah, we want everybody to have their time to enjoy competition, but it may be that a couple weekends out of the year you don't need to compete, or maybe you need to go help out the German Shorthair people and judge for them, or you need to go run the dog wagon at a walk-in trial, or you needed to go over here and help these guys out with their trial and do something other. And I'm like you. If everybody just kind of gave up a little bit, these trials would do a lot better. They'd run smoother, and it wouldn't be such a scramble to find, judges and all that we all go through constantly to try to fill a trial and get things going. And all that hard work, just as well as I do, that all that hard work that people volunteer, you can't thank them enough. You cannot thank them enough.
Nope. Totally agree.
Well, now, Tony, let's bring it up to speed a little bit now. You're a competitor, and you've got roots in shoot to retrieve, an NBHA bridge over into the American field side of competition, now a full-on all-age amateur competitor. Somehow or another, though, it doesn't go far enough for you there. You wind up administratively with the AFTCA, and you've been heavily involved with the AFTCA for years. And the AFTCA, for all of our listeners that aren't aware of that acronym, is the Amateur Field Trial Clubs of America. And what the AFTCA does is understood by a lot of people in the game, and maybe not so much outside, but I'd venture a guess that there's a lot of people inside that don't really know what goes on behind the scenes or what the AFTCA does. So, Tony, tell us what the AFTCA is and what it does for the field trial game.
Well, the broad spectrum of it is that AFTCA is basically the governing and managing body for the sport of amateur field trialing. But the AFTCA kind of cross-pollinates a little bit and is felt directly across the amateur and the open side of the sport. I urge each and every field trialer out there to go to the AFTCA website and go through that 14-point bulletin that we produced, I think, back in early 2022, before the 2022 summer meeting, in a conversation between Franklin Assa, Mark Johnson, and myself, we created a document called "What Does the AFTCA Do for the Sport of Field Trialing?"
Right on the front page of the homepage. Right first thing, if you go to the AFTCA homepage, it's the first thing on there. What does the AFTCA do for the sport of field trialing? You're right.
Yeah, and without me going down and listing every point, that is the most accurate breakdown of what the AFTCA does for the sport of field trialing. And if you dive into each and every one of these and think about actually what's involved in doing those things, you start to realize that the behind the scenes work, the boots on the ground, donated time, energy, money, effort that the AFTCA does for the sport of field trialing is truly immense.
Yeah. And one of the biggest things, Tony, that I think kind of gets swept under the rug or forgotten, especially those of us that have been around for a while, is the AFTCA essentially establishes minimum requirements, rules, and regs for field trials, adopted by all the Field Dog Stud Book field trials. And all those standards and field trial procedures and judicial practices and handler and etiquette and bird dog performance, it essentially sets those foundational principles as to what consummates the performance and etiquette and protocol at a field trial. And how often is that tuned or looked at, or is that something that's ever visited, or is it just kind of concrete?
When these standards, principles, and these things were developed, there was so much thought and so much time put into them that a lot of these things are truly set in concrete.
Yeah.
It's one of those things, though, that they are revisited quite frequently because, as you know, the sport of field trialing is changing.
Sure.
And just as a brace evolved before your eyes, so does the sport of field trialing.
Right.
So more times than not, rules, principles, standards, they typically don't change, but bits and pieces of them may evolve, and there may be modifications to these standards or to the bylaws to fit the ever-changing field trial community.
And the reason I ask that, Tony, is you've taken on a new role here recently. You've been second and third vice president of the AFTCA in the past, but now you're the president. And I ask you that question because I just had a genuine curiosity as to how that's looked at, if it's ever touched or if it's tweaked, because I know people are constantly coming up with new scenarios. There's questions that arise and things are changing, like you said. The dynamics at trials are changing, and the FTCA, for lack of a better explanation, is the body that kind of examines the changing landscape and either adapts or tries to keep field trials and its integrity and the performance standards, all of that glued towards the goal, and that's sportsmanship, high quality animals, and the protection of the amateur status and all that. And I know a lot of that goes into the job you have, but someone that's looking and learning about the FTCA and they're trying to figure out what it does and should they be a member and all that, why should someone be a member of the AFTCA?
Number one, the best answer for that would be, as an amateur field trialer, by supporting the AFTCA, by being an AFTCA member, not only are you going to get your win certificates received, your championships and your placements recognized on an amateur level, you're going to be supporting the governing body that manages the amateur side of field trialing.
Right. And one thing that I tell people, it's not only a managing or governing body, it's an advocacy group. And it's trying to improve things and make things better and give us more venue and give us better opportunities. There's things like the 20th Century Fund and all those great things that go towards improving the state of field trialing and all that. And one thing that I enjoy about the FTCA is the database. And if you want anything at all out of this membership, one thing is if you're particularly competing in amateur trials, you get to go back to the database and see those dogs and those handlers and the records, because the FTCA does a really good job at keeping records and being able to access those. And, if you're doing research on a breeding, or if you're just trying to figure out what dog in this pedigree has done and it's an amateur or a mostly amateur dog, you can go back and revisit that and get all that data and information. It's an awesome resource. But I hear AFTCA president, and that seems like a big role, as I'm sure it is. What does that entail, being the AFTCA president?
It's a job that has many facets. When you're in your 2-year rotation as third vice president, second vice president, first vice president to president, each one of those roles takes on a different, facet. The AFTCA president is basically the executive officer for the AFTCA corporation. You preside over all annual meetings, special meetings. You're responsible for committee establishment and management. You may be put into situations, and you are, as president, you may have to be the final say-so in interpreting the bylaws and the running order.
Yeah.
The running rules, So, Piper Huffman and myself speak 2 or 3 times. Some days you're just making simple decisions or answering questions to trial club members or participants, or situations that were positive, situations that were negative. It takes on many roles, and you kind of have to be ready for something coming out of left field, or you may have time to prepare to answer those questions.
Sure, and you field a lot of phone calls. I know you do, and stuff like that. People with general inquiries and sorting things out. I know that's part of the job. One thing I wanted to ask you that's kind of off cuff here is, I get a lot of questions from newbies, and I get a lot of questions from people that are just looking for more clarity on the question. But I want to ask you and just hear the kind of layman's terms answer to this, because I've heard it answered several different ways, and I've heard good answers and I've heard really bad answers. But I want to hear Tony King answer the question. When somebody wants to know what the actual difference is between an amateur and a professional or an open handler, what exactly constitutes that difference, Tony?
Well, I think, Joe, probably the best thing we could do is read the bylaw. And if there's one thing that I've learned during my presidency in handling situations or addressing, a question in regards to a field trial or anything associated with field trials, the bylaws always prevail.
Yeah, sure.
These bylaws have addressed situations since they were instituted, and they always seem to prevail. So in regards to the definition of a professional and an amateur, Article 2, Section 1 states that any person who receives or has received, either directly or indirectly, compensation for training or handling dogs, including handling of dogs on a plantation or shooting preserve, other than their own or those of immediate family member, is not an amateur.
And there's a couple things in here, and that's the handling, that's the training of a dog, and whether or not that has to do with your job or not, that's another thing too, because we have a lot of competitors that manage plantations. They are technically paid to handle and train dogs too, but then it has to be a dog that's other than a dog that you own or that of an immediate family member. So, and anything that's not that, Tony, is an amateur, correct?
Correct.
Awesome. I just wanted to get that out there in the ether. We have so many people that want to know that, and you heard it straight from the AFTCA president's mouth, straight from the good book, from the bylaws. Now there's no quarrels over it. It's out there.
Yeah.
Well, now, one thing I do want to get you to explain that a lot of other people have questions on, Tony, is this new AFTCA Purina partnership program that was unveiled. A lot of people I've heard are liking this. A lot of people have no idea what it is. And a lot of people, quite frankly, didn't know it even happened. But Purina, along with the AFTCA, has unveiled the Purina Event Sponsorship Program. Tell us what it is.
Well, the Purina Event Sponsorship Program is probably one of the most significant announcements and changes in the field trial world, probably since the UKC's acquisition of the American Field.
Agreed.
Purina, their business plan, they decided to eliminate the payment of field trial ads.
Mm-hmm.
Well, we want to thank Greg Blair and Carl Gunzer, from Purina for their continued commitment and their extended commitment in working with the AFTCA to develop the Purina Event Sponsorship Program. And basically, their renewed commitment is giving back to Field Trial Club members in a different way other than paying for field trial advertisements.
Okay.
So basically, if your club, either open and amateur, is an AFTCA paid member club, you go through the Purina Event Sponsorship Program application stating that you're applying, you're registering this field trial, you're applying for this program, and say it's the Missouri Open Shooting Dog. This is something that I have to do this week. I've paid my AFTCA membership. I'm eligible for the Purina Event Sponsorship Program. I'll go through the application process. It will either be approved or denied. If it's approved, based on the type of stake that it is, field trial stake that it is, whether it's a weekend trial, classic, championship, that trial, that club will be awarded a credit value in monetary dollars. Say, if it's a championship, it will be awarded $500 credit value. Once it's awarded that, field trial clubs will be able to take that monetary value and purchase products through the AFTCA store, such as ribbons, trophies, plaques, bowls, things that they will be able to give back to the field trial participants, handlers, owners, breeders. The AFTCA has acquired specific vendors, such as Triple Crown products, Hodges badges, to provide clothing, apparel, trophies, awards, that field trial clubs can use this credit value to purchase these products.
And one thing I want to add to that, Tony, because I've spent some time with this and really looked it over and crunched the numbers. It is a really good program. Well, first and foremost, let's talk about the Purina thing, because initially people kind of got a little upset maybe that Purina had changed things, or they felt like Purina was back. Listen, folks, Purina's not going anywhere. Purina is all in on field trials. They are committed, and if their history doesn't back that up, well, I can't help you anyways. Purina is synonymous with field trials. They're not going anywhere. And Purina could have just packed their bags and said, hey, we had a nice run. We've had enough. Thank you very much. Instead, Purina did their due diligence. They looked things over, and they said, how can we continue to support this in such a way that makes sense for us? And enter the Purina Event Sponsorship Program. And Tony, one of the things I hear people complain about is when they go to trials, they drive 2 or 3 hours and they actually manage to get a piece of the trial and they get a ribbon or they don't get anything at all. And the prize and the actual physical prize itself isn't exactly what we're after. We're out there to win and get a piece of that and be accomplished. But sometimes people are a little let down when the prize or the prizes just aren't up to par to what they feel like or they feel. But quite frankly, clubs all across the country all have a bottom line to look at. They can't go out and spend $1,000 on prizes, on plaques, on all this stuff. So what this does is actually help supplement that to allow clubs to give their participants and their placements and their winners real good, tangible items with credit. And I've looked through the store 2 or 3 times, and I've got to say there are 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 things that I'm probably just going to buy right out myself, because these are really nice things. They have a super nice logo, and Tony, you and me both know, people that field trial, they die for things with the Purina logo on it. A Purina logo hat is like a gold brick in the field trial world, is it not?
It is. And when the Purina Event Sponsorship Program was initiated, a committee was formed of Frank Lanassa, who we got to give kudos to Frank Lanassa because he spearheaded this whole charge.
Cool.
And Frank Lanassa, Piper Huffman, Mark Johnson, myself, Carl Gunzer, Greg Blair, we had numerous Zoom phone calls, meetings, emails, back and forth. We spent a lot of time searching for the appropriate vendors to provide the products worthwhile to give back to the field trial community. The logo design itself, we went back and forth on that thing for months. So it's a sharp logo, it's a classy logo, and, it gives due diligence to the program itself, gives proper representation of what the program's all about.
Really, really, really nice items for your club to hand out silver platters, crystal bowls, and glass plaques. I'm even looking at some flasks here, all kinds of Carhartt items. A really cool thing. And those ribbons, if you've got a weekender and you're on a budget, that Hodges and AFTCA have teamed up. They've got your ribbons and all that. And with that credit, those clubs don't necessarily have to fret and look at the bottom line and say, okay, can we do this or that? If they apply for this and they get their credit, they go over to the AFTCA store and they can pick out those items and have at it. Or if you're just an individual and you want a cool AFTCA hat, or you're looking for a Carhartt with that Purina and AFTCA logo, they've got it right there. They've got bags, all kinds of really cool stuff. I was a little skeptical at first. Once I've looked it over, it's a great thing. And all those powers that be that helped put this together, really good move, and just so thankful for Purina and your guys' hard work putting that together. And I do want to give a shout out to someone that everybody is familiar with, that if you're an amateur field trialer, you have come across in some form or fashion, and that's Piper Huffman. Piper Huffman is synonymous with AFTCA, and she's the backbone, and she has just done a 2 lifetimes worth of work for American amateur field trialers, and not enough applause can be given to her.
Piper Huffman is the face of the AFTCA organization, in my opinion.
Sure.
I have worked with her now for 5 or 6 months, and there's no better human being on the face of the earth, and nobody that protects amateur field trialing any more than Piper Huffman.
Yeah.
She dedicates her time, her energy, and her life to the AFTCA.
So thankful for her and all her work and all her efforts. But Tony, that's a little bit about the business side of things in the field trial world and the paperwork and all that stuff. Let's jump off that and let's get into some fun stuff here. When I learned that you had an NBHA background, my ears perked up and I wanted to know more. How and why did you get started with the NBHA? How'd that happen? I heard you say shoot to retrieve, and that bridged over to the NBHA. How'd that happen?
Yeah, like I said earlier, I bought a pup from Ray Eubanks in Monette, Missouri, and ran in an NBHA Classic. That puppy run, that puppy placement progressed into, trying to develop a derby, trying to develop a shooting dog, getting involved with the Missouri Bird Hunters Association, becoming secretary-treasurer of the Missouri Bird Hunters Association, going to the NBHA summer meetings. And at one of the particular NBHA summer meetings, I believe it was back in 2007, they had voted to dissolve the NBHA Futurity. They were no longer going to continue the program. Bobby and Mildred Taylor were at a point in their lives. They were stepping away from it, and the national organization said, you know what, we're going to end this program. Well, I remember going back to the hotel room for drinks and cocktails and having a meeting with Chuck Davis, who had just been elected NBHA president. And he said, hey, what can we do to save the NBHA Futurity program? So we sat down, put our heads together. I believe Tim Penn was there. I think Doug Meyer was involved in that, and we came up with a preliminary plan to resurrect the program. And what that entailed was, I believe it was from 2008 to 2012, 13. A team of us individuals from mid-Missouri traveled down to Percy Priest each year and hosted the NBHA Futurity North Central Championship, which later transpired into the Breeders' Invitational Championship.
That's some really cool history, and that's really relevant because this February we have our Breeders' Championship, and we have the Futurity and the Jerry Kilgore Puppy Classic all coming up this February. And it's funny enough that you mentioned your involvement with the Missouri Bird Hunters Association. They're the ones that are hosting this event and have the last couple of years, and that's a collective of people that show up and show out when it comes to trials out there in Grovesprings and in those places. And it's amazing how well they help each other, not only with the walking trials but the horseback trials. Those guys, it doesn't matter, it seems like they're all involved and they're all willing to pitch in and to help out, and that's such a cool collective to be a part of. But the NBHA Futurity and all that seems like it was on the line there for a while, and you kind of fought for it. Why was it so important to resurrect it and to make sure it went on, Tony?
Well, to be honest with you, Joe, at that time, I really didn't understand or appreciate the futurity process. You know, the futurity programs that at that time, you know, I believe the quail futurity at that time was still going on. You had the Midwestern States shooting dog futurity. You had the United States futurity. You know, at that time, I thought I hated to see something that was developed in the early 1980s go away just because, you know, that we didn't have the opportunity or the people to keep it going.
Sure.
And at that time, I really didn't understand the benefits of the futurity program and what's involved and why they're important. And it was something that I was at early stages, you know, in my life and had the time and energy to do it. So they said, hey, would you be willing to take this over? I'm like, sure. But I need to learn a lot more about it and why it's important and what it's all about.
Well, I sure do appreciate that, because now it's one of the biggest dates on our calendar and one of the most well-attended trials and series of trials on the NBHA calendar. It sounds like if it wasn't for you and a few other guys, it may not be around, but one of the mainstays within that trio of trials there is the Jerry Kilgore Puppy Classic. And I've always wanted to ask someone, I don't recall or nor did I know Mr. Kilgore, but can you tell me the significance of Mr. Jerry Kilgore and why his name is attached to the Puppy Classic?
Jerry Kilgore was one of the neatest guys that I was ever around. Jerry was a great family man, a God-fearing man. He loved his wife, his daughter, his son-in-law, and his granddaughter, and he had a tremendous love for bird dogs and bologna sandwiches. You know,
Okay.
he was a character. You know, Jerry had kind of an embroidery trophy business that worked well, you know, with the prizes that went along with the NBHA Futurity. He was such a great guy. And Jerry understood the importance of futurity and the breeding aspect and the promoting aspect of breeding litters, bringing the breeders to a field trial and getting them involved in early Derby development and showcasing these breedings that these breeders were doing.
That's awesome. That's awesome. And it's just one of those names, Tony, that's anytime I saw Jerry Kilgore or heard the word or name Kilgore, it just you automatically associated it with the NBHA, and that's really cool that his memory and all his efforts and what he stood for stays, you know, cemented in NBHA continuings. It's really, really neat. But you too in the past have supported the futurity, all keeping it going, but you also competed in it, and you nominated litters yourself. And from someone that has been down that road and fought for it and saw the importance of it, and to see it what it is now in the hands of Mr. Jim Ogle, who does a great job with it. I tell everybody I think Jim Ogle's got one of the hardest jobs on the NBHA board, because that Futurity and Puppy Classic and Breeders' Championship is a marathon, and it's all hands on deck, and Jim just knocks it out of the park. But if someone was to ask Tony King, why should they nominate their litter to something like this? What does that entail? Why should they do that?
One of the things that I feel very important about is it allows not only breeders that are breeding these litters, handlers, owners, and judges, it allows them to evaluate these young Derby dogs during their development stage. And for futurity dogs and derbies at that time, it allows a person to say, okay, the breedings that I'm doing, are they working out or are they not working out? Do they have the trainability? Do they have the bidability? Do they have the stamina, the presence around game, the competitiveness that I'm wanting when I'm making those breedings? And the futurity process allows those breeders, allows those owners the opportunity to see these Derby dogs during that development and make those assessments. Because take, for instance, the Midwestern States Shooting Dog Futurity, another futurity that I'm currently involved with. It was it was basically in the same stage as the NBHA Futurity. A. Leon Smith and a team of individuals, Oklahoma, Arkansas, the Boyettes, they developed this Futurity, but as they grew older and as field trial club members dissipated, that Futurity was going to go by the wayside. I remember sending a dog with Galen Cooper to Oklahoma, having Galen run my dog for me because I couldn't make the trip, placing in that Midwestern States Shooting Dog Futurity from a breeding that I did from Lester Snow Watch and a Belfield Silver female, and placing fourth and receiving that Montana Silversmith buckle. And I thought that was the coolest thing in the world. And I'm like, you know what? That dog went down there and competed against some of the best open shooting dog derbies in the country, and that was from my breeding.
That's awesome.
And you know, at that time, the whole Futurity process kind of clicked for me. And so the Futurity process brings in a different facet of field trialing that's not highly promoted, and that's the breeder's side.
Yeah, yeah.
So it allows people to say, okay, here's a list of breedings from this Futurity. These dogs over the past 5 years from this sire or this particular dame have been well represented at these Futurities.
Yeah, that's a good point. And, you know, there's other animal sports that they really take their Futurities really, really serious. You know, quarter horses and thoroughbreds and stuff like that. It's a very, very, very large part of their market segment. And I'm like you, I don't know that we promote it the best, but it provides the breeders the ultimate opportunity to compete against other consummate, you know, top of the game breeders, but also provides you with the most honest and top-notch audit of your stock constantly. And you go to these Futurities and you see what wins and what looks good and how these dogs are looking, you're able to make better breeding decisions going forward. And I guess that's really the reason why they exist. They're an arena for breeders to, you know, perfect or puree their breeding decisions to a point where they're as best as they possibly can be with results and eyes on this stock as they compete against the best, trying to put the best against the best.
Yep, that's absolutely correct. And, you know, the Midwestern, our Futurity is a 30-minute qualifier and a 1-hour callback. So it's somewhat of an endurance Futurity.
Yeah.
You know, you're evaluated for 30 minutes. Then the judges, they may call back 8 dogs and place 4 dogs on standby. But the judges, they evaluate these dogs. Then they have the ability to pair up dogs on specific courses and evaluate them over that hour in a different light. So they may see things on a different course that they may not see on that 30-minute course. So it is a unique way to evaluate young dogs during their peak derby development stage.
And those end users, those new field trialers or those field trialers that are just going to be at every dance, this gives them another avenue, and this gives them a really unique avenue and a really specific avenue to go and compete against the best of the best. If you tell me, if I'm looking at a litter and I'm thinking about buying a pup or two, and I see that they're Futurity nominated with the NBHA, that is just a cherry on the cake. That is an extra good thing, and if this dog looks like it's going to have the makings to be competitive or you want to see where it's at, that dog gets to go and compete in that arena, and you get that honest audit of that, and it's just so much good for the breeder, so good for the handlers, and so good for the end users.
Absolutely. And it's a shame, you know, we lost the quail Futurity years ago, and that used to be one of the biggest Futurities,
yes,
you know, in the field trial world. So these Futurities, we need to hang on to them.
Sure.
We need to covet them, and we need to promote them, and Futurities have changed quite a bit. Early on, back when there was a lot of puppy breeders, back when there was a lot of guys breeding litters, you know, guys were more willing to nominate litters and throw their name in the hat and try to get their puppies into hands of the open handlers or amateur handlers when there are a lot more of those available.
Right.
Well, now Futurities have changed a little bit. Breeders are they're not as willing to nominate litters because they want to evaluate those litters and only nominate litters out of the derbies that they're going to carry on. The derbies they take into the fall may not make it into the spring. So it's a little different landscape. The Futurities have a little different landscape right now than they did, say, 20 years ago.
Yeah, those breeders are trying to protect their breeding stock, and they want to make sure that certain progeny carry through and represent that breeding pair, that stud dog or that brood matron to the best of its possible. And it's a little bit defensive move for those breeders to do that. They're kind of trying to control their pieces and the game board at the same time. And you're right, it has changed. But regardless of the fact, the Futurity has a place in all arenas. It puts the best of the best in that young stock, and it is the best evaluation of that young stock and those breeding decisions, and there's no better place to do it. And I encourage anybody and everybody, whether you're horseback or whether you're walking, doesn't matter, whether you're in the cover dog woods, get those litters nominated, those Futurities, and give them that extra dynamic. Give them that chance. You may not take them, but somebody else may, and it will provide a lot of information and a lot of good for you and the breeder and the end users as well. But now, Tony, I want to give you a chance to riff on some of your own dogs. We like talking about everybody else's dogs to a certain degree, but then we want to talk about our dogs a little bit. And I've got a couple dogs here that I wanted to hear you talk about a little bit that I'm familiar with. And the first dog here was Jayhawk. Rockacre Blackhawk son there out of LU Katie Lee, multiple championship winner. And one of the awesome things that I like seeing about certain dogs is that dog did a little bit of everything. It competed here, there, and yonder. It won walking, and it won the shooting dog horseback. That's such an awesome thing. Tell us about Jayhawk.
Jayhawk was a black and white dog, out of the Rockacre Blackhawk, the famous Rockacre Blackhawk LU Katie Lee cross. I acquired Jayhawk. I believe Jayhawk early on in his development was in the hands of Sean Kinkler. I acquired Jayhawk from a gentleman down in Georgia after he developed a couple little bad habits, and he happened to fit my program and went on to win both in the NBHA, in the open shooting dog world for Jerry Haley. And he was one of those dogs. Jayhawk was one. I always tell people, they say, what was Jayhawk like? I said, he was tremendous on the ground. He loved to run that front end. He loved to compete. But Jayhawk was a little ornery. He was always one of those dogs during a field trial that he was going to get his own. He was notorious for knocking one covey of birds. Whether the judges seen it or not, if you could get by without him taking his own, he could go on and easily win the stake.
He was going to get his somewhere along the line. He was getting his due.
Yeah, he was a lot of dog for walking, and sometimes he was even a lot of dog for open shooting dog stakes. But myself, and when I put him with Jerry Haley, we had a tremendous amount of fun with that dog. But he was a great dog. He was a friendly dog, but just absolutely beautiful on point with a tremendous nose, and he was just a lot of fun.
I had a Rockacre Blackhawk son myself, and he was just as like as what you explained. He was black and white, real fancy, real handy dog. Not a big pointer, but real handy, real tidy dog, and had that black head and white body with a few black spots and stuff. Sounds just like it. But I love that. I love what that dog represents in your point in your career there, Tony, because it's a lot of where I'm at right now. I compete a lot of walking. I compete a lot of horseback. And you look through that wins registry there, and runner-up at the NBHA National Amateur Shooting Dog Championship in 2012, which is really cool. Goes on to win Region 5 Amateur Shooting Dog Championship on horseback, and first place Missouri, Jayhawk Open Shooting Dog Championship, all that stuff. It's just really cool, and it's kind of where I'm at in life. So I saw that, and I thought, wow, that dog represents a lot of where I'm at too. But there's another dog here that gets a certain prefix that now follows you with your dogs that you have now on your string. But that dog is named Wild Covey Heatwave, another male pointer by Lester Snowwatch. Tell us a little bit about Heatwave.
In 2006, I took Galen Silver Girl, which I acquired from Galen Cooper, down and bred to Lester Snowwatch, coming out, I believe, of his Derby year campaign.
So Snowwatch hadn't won the National yet.
He had not.
Wow, you're on the front end, smart breeder.
Yes. And that litter produced three notable dogs: Wild Covey Heatwave, which we called Henry; Wild Covey Cold Front, who was Pete; and a female called Pure Henri that did quite a bit of winning in the NBHA circuit. And both I had Henry and Pete and Sydney during their early development, and they all started in the NBHA walking game.
Yeah.
Henry and Pete went on to have tremendous careers in the open shooting dog world. They were the type of dogs, and you can talk to Jerry Haley about this. Henry and Pete were the type of dogs at a field trial when no other dogs were finding birds. They were the type of dogs that could dig up one find and get you in the money.
Kind of a lesser Snow Watch trait too, very much so.
They were bird dogs.
Bird dogs.
And that was kind of, Jayhawk, Heatwave, Cold Front, those were kind of the three dogs that allowed me to take the steps to where I am today. And I think we all kind of, as field trialers, go through that process.
Yes.
We have certain dogs in our history that allow us or afford us more opportunities to grow and change and maybe do things differently than what we did when we started.
My Nick dog is a 4-time champion. I just said the same thing to somebody else the other day. They were asking me about him, and he's in the latter stages of his career. He's almost ready to turn 10, and somebody was asking me about him the other day, and I said, I owe that dog so much more than I can ever give him other than a warm house and food to eat, because he took me places, and he afforded me the opportunity to meet people that are now super good friends of mine, and my network in the field trial world has grown immensely, and I've been able to get my picture taken, and people recognize me because of my dog, and that is such a cool thing that field trialing affords you if you're lucky enough to be successful or have that really good dog or that dog of a lifetime. And sure enough, that Heatwave, or Henry as you call him, is sure enough that NBHA National Amateur Shooting Dog Championship winner in 2009, turns right around and wins runner-up at the Region 5 Walking Shooting Dog Championship. Then you win the NBHA National Amateur Invitational Championship in 2009, and you're back and forth on a horse and on the ground walking this dog. You win the Amateur Shooting Dog Championship 2 years in a row with Heatwave. Just a super consistent dog. Now tell us a little bit about the dogs that you ran down in West Tennessee, some of the dogs that are currently on your string, Tony.
So right now I currently have two dogs that I'm campaigning. I'm running a black and white pointer male called Wild Covey Strike Zone. I acquired him again from Galen Cooper. He is a pup that Bob Barker raised out of his open range Terminator dog. And he's out of a black ice female, and acquired him in a blizzard like conditions. What we currently have, brought him home, had to raise him inside, and it was kind of an accidental acquisition type thing. And basically, Galen bought this pup for my daughter. And says, hey, your daughter needs to, I'm like, Galen, I don't need another dog type scenario.
He knew what he was doing.
Oh, yeah. Well, the more I ran him and the more I worked him, the more I liked him.
That's
cool. He's one of those dogs he's an off-age dog. I believe he's an October, November pup.
Okay.
So we basically missed our Derby season, and we're now, a first-year all-age dog. And so we're going through first-year all-age dog type things.
And I know people, there's a rap on that. I'm going to rap on this a little bit, Tony. These off-age dogs, people treat that like it's the plague almost. But, you just said, that dog pretty much missed its Derby season. That sounds really depressing. But I'll be honest with you. I've seen a lot of dogs at trials and on circuits that probably didn't need to be running their Derby season because they pick up bad habits and they're not able to be chiseled and worked on that well during that Derby season because they're more worried about running other than working. And that dog probably could use another year before it got into competition. So that's not always a bad thing.
No, it's not. Wild Covey Heatwave, Wild Covey Cold Front, that litter was a late year litter. I believe it was an August litter.
You've got a thing with off-age dogs. Good for you.
Yeah, it was what Heatwave had 9 championship placements and Cold Front had 5.
I'd say that
many
paid
of them
off.
in the open. That paid off.
Yeah,
So,
for sure.
Bo Strike Zone. He's one of those dogs that now, by taking him to West Tennessee, had a pretty good go with him at each place, and I learned a lot about what I had.
Sure.
I can compete with those dogs. He can run with those dogs. Andy Doherty had him in Canada. Tells me all the time the dog's way too smart for me. So. We got high hopes for him.
That's awesome.
I also have a Derby female out of a litter that I raised out of Wild Covey Jackie, which is a daughter, one of the last litters that Happy Jack had.
Oh, yeah.
And Miller Speed Dial. There were 2 pups in that litter that I kept, and Andy Doherty bought one of those.
Wild Covey Derecho, right? Derecho.
Yep, Wild Covey Derecho.
Gotcha.
Which I've received a lot of heat over that name, but her name is Wendy. Her call name is Wendy, and derecho means straight line wind.
I looked up the definition, and if her name's Wendy, you had a lot of thought in that. So don't listen to too much of the heat. Some people don't near the thought into the names like you did.
Well, it was one of those things, and you've probably been through that process. You get outvoted in the family when you start proposing.
Oh,
names.
see, you've done a dangerous thing. You allow the family to get involved, but it's also a good move too to ensure that maybe there's another dog down the pipeline if they get to name it.
I've had more wins with my Derby than I have with the Strike Zone dog, but they're both. What I've learned about both of them is they're going to be competitive. They have the capability. They're both top-notch bird dogs, and they have bright futures ahead of them if they can stay healthy and I don't screw them up.
Sometimes that's the hardest part, is just staying out of their way, isn't it?
Right.
Well, that's
Absolutely.
awesome. That's awesome. It sounds like you had a good time there at West Tennessee with them, and good luck with you the rest of the season with those dogs. Now, Tony, we come to the part of the interview there where we kind of take a step back and look at the fishbowl that is field trial and talk about some big-ticket items and some big-picture things. What have been some of your most fondest memories and most treasured things that you've come across competing in field trials?
There are so many people involved in our sport that have much larger accomplishments than I. They've bred great dogs. They've had a lot more championships. They've been in leadership positions for so much longer. But to answer your questions in regards to that, what's some of my biggest accomplishments? Some of the things probably the thing that I'm most proud of in my field trial tenure is not what I've accomplished, but the people that this thing has allowed me to meet,
Amen,
become friends with, to be able to call when I'm 4 states away and got a flat tire, spending time with them, and having a drink with them, going out to eat with them. I'll remember those memories probably longer. The championship that Henry won back in 2008, where he had 5 or 6 fines.
Yeah.
So those things will go away, but the people that I meet along this journey are just as important or more important to me than any of the championships that I've won or could win, down the road.
Well said. Well said. And that's the people that enjoy field trialing and seemingly have a longer run at it are those people that recognize that it's the people that really will make or break your career in it, because the friendships that you make and the network connections that you make and the memories you make with those people, quite frankly, they'll last a lot longer than that dog that's only going to live 10, 11, 12, 13 years. These friendships will last 20 and 30 years, and these are people, just like you said, that'll be there when you need a hand. They'll have a pup for you whenever you're ready to take on another pup, and you build a family outside of your own. And I can honestly say, for me, that's probably the answer for me, is the friendships that I've made because of the bird dog and because of field trialing. It's a great, great, great thing, and that's an easy thing to sell between me and you and the people in the game right now, Tony. But we're at a crossroads here where the dynamic of people are changing, working hours and conditions and vying for people's attention at home and hobby time and all that. We need to grow the sport. We need to work on growing the sport. So I want to ask you, just in a roundabout way, how do we grow this sport?
That's the $8 million question.
Yeah.
We are immersed in a sport that is so hard to stay involved in when you are at the point of your life to where you're raising a family, building financial stability, trying to build a career. This sport is financially a hard sport to stay involved in when you look at, feeding a horse, having the equipment, taking care and feeding of the dogs, having the grounds or the quail or the opportunity to stay involved in. And I think, one of the things we have to do as field trial members wanting to have this sport for our grandchildren is we need to evolve with the type of people that are wanting to get involved in this sport. I think we need to take the tradition and the history of the sport and learn how to promote, embrace, and present it to a different generation of kids that didn't grow up following their father's footsteps quail hunting in West Central Illinois.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of that has to be done, as you well know, through social media.
Very much so.
Kids learn differently than we did when we were kids.
Right.
And I think we need to develop some unique ways and some ways to promote our sport in a manner that brings it to the forefront for kids there's a lot of outdoor kids out there. I think that we need to present it in a manner that they want to come see what it's all about.
Yeah.
And I think we have to do a better job. And Joe, I have to commend you on what you're doing because you're absolutely on the right path of trying to promote what we need to promote to grow the sport. Every one of your podcasts that I've listened to, your point, the thing that you promote the most is the growth of our sport. And we have to do this through podcasts. We have to do this through YouTube channels. We have to do this through Facebook and Twitter and Instagram. And I think we just have to change the methods that we used to use to promote and present them in a light that people want to become more involved in.
That's a great answer, and I thank you for that. I get to have a lot of fun by doing this and all that, but I kind of take a stance that if it's not growing, it's contracting or it's going in another direction other than up. And one of the things is aesthetics. If it doesn't look like it matters, then it probably won't matter to people. So, I used to be the stickler at trials when I would run weekend trials at the club. We didn't want to stack up dogs on trash cans for winners photos, right? We wanted to have a table. We wanted to have trophies and the brands and the banners and as many people in those photos because we wanted to make it look like it mattered. Because if it doesn't look like it matters, then it won't. It won't look like it matters to anybody. And that perspective, I think, can be adapted to the sport in entirety. We have to take a different approach. We have to be willing to put in work in other avenues, if that's promotion, if that's advertising. And then the other thing too, Tony, is options. We have a segment of people that have bird dogs and they love the upland lifestyle, but they're just not into field trials or they're just not competitive people. We still have to go after them. They represent a segment that can help grow the sport and then can take it on. And then the kid aspect as well, the Youth Field Trial Alliance that works tirelessly to try to give those avenues to kids to get involved. And one of the things that we're kind of beta testing right now, Tony, is a syndicate option. I'm going to try to source a high-quality field trial prospect from capable hands that we know is going to be a competitor, that has talent, that is precocious, and we're going to give people the opportunity, hopefully, if there is enough interest. I'm not saying this will happen. There may not be any interest at all, and if not, that's okay. But I know in thoroughbreds, another line of work that I'm in, and along those avenues, syndication is a really big part of the ownership segment, and we want to give people the opportunity at an affordable price to come in and buy a share or shares and experience that ownership part of it and get updates from the trainer and be able to go and watch that dog as an owner and to just to see what that's like and hopefully get your picture taken or read about your dog in the field and be a part of that whole thing. And there might be some interest in that and there might not, but we got to try some new things. And syndication, there's already some people involved in syndication. They may not call it that, but that's a new thing I think that may take off as well. What do you think about that?
I think syndication is a great thing, and we've seen that, in the open shooting dog world, with some of Sean Kinkler's owners being successful with the dogs that they're putting out there. I think one of the things that, the first step in the problem is realizing that there's a problem and taking the time to have the hard discussions to say, look, we have to make some changes. We've seen an evolution of less and less weekend field trials. The AFTCA developed the Top Amateur Handler Award Program to promote the 30-minute weekend field trialer.
Right.
Bringing that winner to the Purina Awards and presenting them with a large blue crystal for their efforts, in 30-minute field trials. All of those type things matter. We don't have any room to push anybody away, whether it be a continental breed person, a setter person, a pointer person. We need everybody. We need everybody to be field trial club members, leaders, dog wagon drivers, cooks,
Sure.
Horse people, you name it.
Yeah, that's a sermon that needs to be preached more often. We need more hands on deck, and we need some of those people that are on deck that aren't lending hands to start lending hands. And go grab a kid and go grab somebody that has a bird dog, whether it's a meat dog or not, and take them to a field trial. Give them their opportunity to see it and let them decide on their own if they like it or not. And if they do, they might end up like a Tony King or a Joe Hopkins that can't get enough of it and is just constantly – their thoughts and their talk and everything they do has got a bird dog somewhere around it or at the center of it. And you never know what you'll create if you just give somebody that opportunity. And I see a lot of people, and fortunate enough to meet some people throughout my forays this season that have gotten started, through various means on social media. They've seen it. They want to give it a try. A lot of people listening to the podcasts took their first jump this year or this season into trialing, and that's really, really cool. But they're always thirsty and hungry for advice. So, Tony, what advice can we give these people that are starting to get their feet wet or are going to jump into the field trial game for the first time?
Well, my advice to new field trialers is, start slow, try to listen, learn, figure out what path you want to take. Now, it's probably going to change, but my advice to new field trialers is don't be scared. The guys that you look up to or see in these $80,000 trucks and trailer rigs pulling into a field trialer, they all started the same way that new person did.
That's right.
And be willing to find a mentor, find somebody that can help you develop that dog to where you want to get that dog to. And one of the things that I always try to do is I'd like to get new members coming into field trialing involved on the opposite side of things of competing. Get involved into a field trial club.
Sure.
Learn get involved in the working side of the sport so you can appreciate the winning side of the sport a little more.
That's a great point.
It gives you, a different perspective. It allows you to have maybe a little different outlook than, hey, I got to hit this field trial, I got to hit this field trial, and I got to hit this field trial because my dog's in a point race. I got to win, when in fact, what the community actually needs is more club members and people hosting field trials and more weekend field trials so we can get back to having fun and sitting around a trailer at night on a Saturday night after a weekend field trial and having a cold beer and cooking hot dogs and talking about, which dog did great and which dog knocked bird and how mad you are at your dog. And, those are, when you asked about some of my, best memories, some of those times at weekend field trials were just as great as winning a championship.
Aren't they, though? And I think the tone is just different. There's not as much stress, and there's not as many people worried about getting a piece of that championship or getting that CH on the dog, and they're not all tense and stuff. That weekend trial, you just can't substitute for it. It's just something different. There's a lot of laughter and a lot of fun, and it's a really special thing, isn't it?
It is. It truly is, and it's a part of our sport that needs to be embraced more and promoted more. And I think if we got back to the more weekend field trials, and your entry fees are less, your travel expenses might be less, and it might allow some opportunity to guys that don't have horses that can show up and borrow a horse and throw them in the mix and let them judge a puppy stake and let them learn the importance of helping, a field trial club member go put out birds at 5:00 in the morning.
Sure.
All of those things are important to the process, of field trialing.
I've offered people to come and walk with me while I handle, or sit on the horse next to me while I'm judging, and all those different things, and ask questions, ask those what seems like stupid questions. And we field a lot of those through our social media vehicles online. People just want to know the difference in this, or what does this word mean? And we take it for granted. This game has a lot of nuances that people just don't understand. Even people that compete with dogs in other field trial games and circuits, they don't have a clue what some of our verbiage means, or why is it quality over quantity. Those are some hurdles that people have to get over or understand, and they're just not best explained sometimes over a keyboard. You need to get out in the field and see it unfold and have somebody explain it to you. You said that perfectly, Tony. Well said. Now, let's talk about this last thing here, Tony. And this is the perspective here that an AFTCA president probably has, and you've probably thought of it. You sound like you have a mind like mine. Where do you see this sport 20 years from now?
I wish I could answer that question.
It's tough.
And I wish I could. I think we're at a point in the world of field trialing that is a huge unknown question, with the amount of field trial grounds that have been lost, with the number of open handler owners that have become uninvolved. I think the amateur side of the sport is fairly consistent. I really do. And I think if you look at the landscape, you can see that the amateurs are hosting a lot of the open trials.
That's exactly right.
They're going out and they're competing when their schedule's allowed. I think the amateur side of our sport is very consistent. It's very well managed. It's got a great foundation. Now, not being involved per se as an open handler, but somebody that hosts open shooting dog championships and an open shooting dog futurity, the open side of the sport's a little unknown right now, to be honest with you.
Sure.
I don't want to, present a doom and gloom answer, but I think everybody out there in the field trial world could agree with me on this.
Yeah.
And I think that for the sport to exist, as we've talked about throughout, our talk here, I think everybody needs to take a role in all sides of the sport of field trialing.
Right.
The one thing that I would tell any new field trialer or anybody that's acquiring a leadership position in field trialing is, if you love the game and you have a passion for the dogs, the horses, and it's not strictly a money venture or a side hustle for you, always try to do what's best for the future of the sport before what's necessarily best for me and my dogs. I think that's probably, if you kind of if you love the sport and you want to protect it, I think that type of outlook goes a lot farther than I'm going to get mine now type attitude.
And, although not monetarily, the sport has a way of giving back. I think a lot of the guys and gals that have been in the game for years on years, they probably tell you the same thing I will, in that there's a lot of time, there's a lot of effort, and a lot of hard work, and more times than not, you're not winning. But the sport has a way of giving back to you, and that's through memories and friendships and broadening of your network connections and all of those great things, and a sport that garners a love that's hard to explain to other people, and the symphony of field trials that it is, where where man, dog, and sometimes horse are in unison, and it's a really primal thing and a really beautiful thing to do, and hard to explain sometimes, but there's very few arenas in this country that offer that kind of experience and that kind of unison with animals that we love. And if you're an animal person, if you're in this, even if it's just on the dog level, you're an animal person. And if we don't take care of the sport, if we don't make ourselves known and let legislators know that we need grounds and we support and we offer things and we're a community and we're a lifestyle, then shrinking and contracting is a thing that is probably going to be in our future for a little while. But that's why we have to work hard, get involved if you're not, find a club like Tony said, and find people and get those dogs on the ground and get after it.
Well said. Well said, my friend.
Tony, any parting thoughts before we go?
No, I just want to reiterate, Joe, what you're doing for the sport of field trialing is highly commendable. And I just want to thank you for this opportunity, because there are so many more people in our sport that have a lot more history and tradition, or as deserving as I am to be part of what you're doing. And I want to thank you again on behalf of myself and the AFTCA for allowing me this opportunity, to bend your ear for an hour or so. And the sport greatly appreciates it.
Well, Tony, it was an easy interview to pencil in because you're like what I said earlier. You're not just a taker, you're a doer. You're a guy that's getting his hands dirty. You're leading the AFTCA, you're reporting, you're judging, and you're giving. And like we've said, we need more people to give, and you're definitely in that column and category. Tony, thanks for coming on the Breakaway Podcast.
Thank you, Joe.
That was the Breakaway Podcast. Thank you so much for joining us. If you enjoyed the podcast, please tell a friend, like, and subscribe to all of our social media platforms to stay up to date on everything National Bird Hunters Association and all other field trial related content. But hopefully, we'll see you next time at the Breakaway.